Stephen King novels are synonymous with horror, but in reality he writes many different types of story, all still a bit horror-y though. So where does the movie version of The Long Walk fit into it all? Let's talk about it here on the Film Podcast. I've just seen The Long Walk. You know, Stephen King has got a checkered history with cinema. Certainly a checkered history of his book adaptations on film. If you think back to The Shining, for example, famously hated by Stephen King, but famously loved by everybody else in the world, me included. I mean, Jack Nicholson, come on. So it's a big surprise for me, whilst looking at the credits of this, to see that Stephen King is there as a producer. I'm pretty sure his name was in the credits. But interestingly as well, another name in the credits is a guy called J.T. Molnar. He was the writer, he wrote the screenplay of this. And I think that's interesting because he made one of my favourite films of last year. If you check out my top 10 of 2024, shameless promotion, you'll see that Strange Darling is in there. I think it's at number 8 or 9 or 7 or whatever. Somewhere in there is Strange Darling, and what a great film that was. Well, J.T. Molnar wrote the screenplay for this, and I think that the screenplay and the performances are something that makes this film really great. But there are some problems. So let's get out of here and let's talk about some of the reservations, the problems, the stuff that I think this movie is lacking, and some stuff that I think this movie has got oodles of. Oodles of? Oodles of. What does that mean? You know, the multiplex was kind of quiet tonight, but the screening I was in for The Long Walk was really busy. There were loads of people seeing it. And again, this is one of those nights where you'd expect the cinema to be very, very quiet, but it was pretty busy. And I think the general feeling about this film is that people enjoyed it. This is an interesting film, and I think that's a good thing because interesting films are worth talking about. And I did feel stuff watching this. I did. There were moments of emotionalness. There were moments of look awayness and all of that kind of thing. And that was only because of, I think, mostly the performances. And again, that screenplay. I mean, it's got moments of brilliance in it. The screenplay has got real moments of poignancy. You know, just great writing. The performances are great in this. Everybody in it is superb. They really are. There's not a single thing that people do in this movie that is bad in any way, shape or form. One of the things that we need to talk about with this is what kind of a film is it? Whenever I think about a Stephen King story, I always immediately think of horror. That's the first thing I think of is horror. And The Long Walk isn't really a horror film, but it kind of is at the same time. I've always said this in a lot of my other reviews, how horror can encompass so many different types of stories, I suppose. And The Long Walk is a real out there kind of a horror film in the umbrella of horror films. But I don't think it's an out there kind of a film from a story perspective or from anything like that. It's fairly conventional. In fact, I would say that it's extremely simple, the premise, the whole idea. It's sort of a little bit Hunger Games. It's set in this really weird, odd, dystopian future. Or this dystopian past, I'm not really sure, but I don't think it really matters. Its message is right there. If you think about this movie, then you're within your rights to imagine that this kind of dystopian thing could so easily seep its way into our reality. Patriotism at all costs, at any costs, whatever it is, patriotism is the only thing that matters. It shows us that unbridled patriotism, even from the people who are taking part in The Long Walk. It's a voluntary thing. You know, you volunteer to do it and you get picked in a lottery, kind of like the Hunger Games. If you listen to what some of the characters say, they say that, well, actually, you know, that's not the case. It's a lottery where everyone's entered into it. And if you get picked, then you get picked and you have to go and do it. There's no freedom there, right? Because you're forced into it if you're called up for it. We can attribute all of what goes on in this and map it onto our own reality. And we can say, well, okay, right, what's the message here? What is it trying to tell us? And you learn a little bit about what it's trying to tell us through the conversations from the characters. And that's why I'm saying that the plot is so simple that it can only work if its characters work. Its characters do work, especially the two main characters. I always go on about characters. I talk about characters a lot in my reviews. This is a real example of how important it is to have good characters. You know, to have characters that are not only emotional, but also strong and also believable and also honest and good. And I think The Long Walk, it starts off and its characters are all sort of versions of themselves as they go on the long walk, as things start to go wrong, as shit starts to get real. The facades that they put on start to disappear, and the actual humans, the humanity in them, comes to the forefront. And that's what we get to see. Those are the ideas that we connect with in this film. Because if you think about it as a dystopian future thing, you know, it's very hard to feel something for any of that, because it's so awful. I mean, it's so horrible. The only real way to connect with it is definitely through its characters. And I think that every single character played by every single actor in this really puts in a great performance, and it does make you connect with them. At first, it's shocking, and then it starts to become normal. And that's kind of done on purpose, because if this was reality, if this is what we were seeing, like people getting voted out of the Big Brother house, but on a much more serious and horrific scale, then I think we'd be desensitized to that particular thing. If it was, you know, a contest that happened every year. It loosely reminds me a little bit of The Running Man as well. That's something. I think if you combine The Running Man with The Hunger Games, you've got the gist of what we're dealing with here. The cast is huge. I mean, it's got a massive cast. As you'd expect, there can only be one winner. I mean, are they winners, really? But there can only be one winner. So whilst I was watching the characters grow to like each other and grow to sort of become a unit, let's say, I sort of forgot that they were going to end up, well, I mean, there can only be one winner, right? So The Long Walk is an interesting piece of work. I loved it and I hated it at the same time. And maybe that's the whole idea. Maybe that's what this is all about. You know, it's not my kind of a film, I'll be honest with you. It's not my kind of a film because it doesn't have those moments where plot development happens. There is no plot development at all. Its premise is just one simple thing. And that's okay. I mean, that's fine. What you do with it is what counts here. It probably could have involved a little bit more of the real world around it, about what it represents and what it is. If it's a fascist regime that's in charge of the country, there are many ways that that can be shown to us, and there are many ways that we can connect with it more. But as well as that, a little bit more backstory would have been nice. I rejoiced in the fact that the Fantastic Four First Steps didn't have a shit ton of backstory. But here, it would have been nice to have some backstory. We do get some backstory from the characters when they talk about, you know, who they are, when they open up a little bit more, when they get to know each other. That's all right. But I'm talking about backstory to do with the world that we're in, because it's very bleak. I mean, it's really bleak. And of course it's really bleak. It's not going to be anything but bleak, because this whole premise is just, I mean, it's horrible. I mean, it is horrible. Can you imagine living in a world like that? A world like that can quite easily sneak up on us, you know, without us really paying attention to it. A world where we accept that kind of thing that happens in The Long Walk. Before we know it, it could just be there. And the people that disagree with it will just do that. They'll just disagree with it. They won't do anything about stopping it. And the people that go with it, the people that love it, the people that get on board with it, will be the ones that are waving the flags, and the ones that are stamping the feet, and the ones that are cheering when horrific things happen live in front of us. Is that echoing reality? I mean, of course it is. And I suppose your reaction to something like The Long Walk will tell you the kind of person that you are. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's what this is trying to say. And if that's the case, then it does it really well, because I did hate it because of that. I hated it. And maybe the kind of person I am is the kind of person that would never ever in a million years want to see this take place in our reality. And it scares me, the fact that, could it? Could it really happen? This is a spoiler-free review, as I always try and do on this channel. So let's go through the story a little bit, and let's not spoil it, because we don't want to be doing that. We don't want to be giving away anything important in this. The Hunger Games and Running Man are two things that you can attribute this to. I said that before, and it's definitely true. But the thing is, the difference is that it only features men, for a start off. And I think the idea is to make the masculine to become masculine again, for men to become men, and all that shit, which is prevalent because of the army and the sort of authoritarian presence that is around the Long Walk. And that authoritarian presence is right there throughout the entire thing. The cameras are watching you, the guns are pointed at you, and there's nowhere you can go except on the Long Walk. That's it. It's balanced with this whole idea that, because these people have chosen to become contestants in this, then they've sort of put themselves up for it. They're aware of the consequences, they're aware of what's going to happen, and they do it to themselves. That's what creates the conflict in the story and the conflict in the characters. And I think that's handled really well. I think that's handled really, really well. And you kind of forget that when you watch it. You forget that these people have applied to be in this. But then, as I say, you kind of learn as the story goes along that that might not be the case anyway. Simply put, you walk until you can't walk anymore. We get introduced to the characters, they're all there, and because it's the beginning of the Long Walk, everyone's full of energy and full of vigor. They're up for it, we're up for it, we're gonna win. Everyone's gonna win. Everyone's got that attitude of, I'm gonna win this. There can only be one winner. So we know from the very beginning, from meeting all of the characters, that we're gonna lose pretty much all of them. And that is a real bleak sensibility to have. That makes you feel a bit shit from the very beginning. Knowing that whatever we learn about these characters, the backstories, everything else, we're going to have to go through an emotional thing when they meet their maker. All right, let's talk about the performances in The Long Walk. Our main character is Cooper Hoffman. And if that name sounds familiar, then it's familiar because he's the son of Philip Seymour Hoffman, who is a cinematic legend, let's be honest. And he plays Ray Garrity, who is the main character, I'd say, alongside David Johnson, who plays Peter McVries. And those two guys, they kind of form this bond, this friendship that lasts throughout the entire movie. It's a great friendship that they have. In terms of performances, I think David Johnson, is just, David Johnson's just incredible. He's just amazing. He is so good in this. This is just a superstar performance from David Johnson. And I've not seen him in many things. Alien Romulus, yeah. He's amazing in Alien Romulus, but this is just outstanding stuff. He's one of the things that make this super great in terms of it just being okay great, if you know what I'm saying. You've got some great supporting actors as well. You've got the likes of Garrett Waring, who plays Billy. He's seemingly one of the toughest guys on the Long Walk. Again, it's like accepting that vulnerability is something that we see happen throughout this entire film. And most of the characters end up doing that. No matter how tough or how hard they are, they fall to pieces. Watching a character like Billy Stebbins fall apart, it's a phenomenal performance. There's the performance from an actor called, I think his pronunciation is Tut Uot. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but he puts in an amazing performance. Ben Wang, he plays Hank Olson, and it's like, he's got a plan, basically, to get through it. I'm not going to give away, any spoilers at all about what happens to who I'm talking about, but kind of a bit of a comic relief, but at the same time, horrific, Unrecognizable to me, and I did not know before I went to see it. Mark Hamill plays the Major. I suppose you can say he's a major, essentially. Whoever Mark Hamill drew his inspiration from, then I don't know. You tell me. I'm not going to state the obvious. He's extremely cold, and he's delivering the message. The message of the company, the government, the fascist regime. It's so horrible. It's so awful. But it's also inspiring at the same time. Come on, guys. Come on, lads. You can get through this. You can do it. You can do it. But at the same time, it's like, why are we even doing this in the first place? Why are we even going through this? Why is society making these men go through this? Well, I say men, it's boys, right? They're not men. They're kids, essentially. Mark Hamill plays that role perfectly, utterly perfectly, as a fascist dictator, but not a fascist dictator at the same time. Brilliant. So good. Right. Let's carry on and talk about The Long Walk a little bit more. For me, cinema is an emotional experience. And if I don't get an emotional experience from watching something, then I can't connect with it. It doesn't quite work for me if I don't feel that. But I think The Long Walk definitely does start off as a cold dystopian thing. And it kind of remains a cold dystopian thing as well. It does subtly and gently bring its emotional core to the forefront towards the middle of the movie. And I guess, as I said earlier, that's probably all done by design. I mean, it must be, right? I've got huge faith in JT Molnar as a filmmaker, writer, whatever kind of thing that he does with films. I'm there, right? I'm on board with him. So let's talk about the director of The Long Walk. He has done a good job here. To bring a visual flair to something as simple as this is quite a feat, I guess. It is all set, just doing one particular thing. There's no variation in the way that this looks. It kind of looks the same all the way through. But that's not a bad thing, because I think there's a lot of use of the simple environments that this film has. There's a lot of creativeness around that. The way that they make the setting look dystopian is quite inventive, quite interesting. Those tank things that follow the characters all the way through the film, they've got this ominous presence to them. They're like always there, and you never lose sight of them during any of the shots in this film. You can see them always lurking around. They've always got their cameras or their guns pointed at the characters in the movie. It does create a tension with them just being there. It's interesting the way that the director creates that claustrophobic feeling. Even though the characters are walking on these big open roads through these big rural landscapes, that tension and claustrophobia is there, and you can see it and you can feel it. So Francis Lawrence is the director. His first movie was Constantine, which is the one with Keanu Reeves. It's basically pitching Keanu Reeves against the devil sort of thing, because that's what it's about. But Constantine's a pretty great fantasy movie. It's a pretty great action movie as well. It's all right. He's had big, massive blockbuster hits, such as I Am Legend, the Will Smith special effects bonanza. Remember Will Smith? Remember before Will Smith went completely mad? And I've mentioned it a few times during the review, but The Hunger Games. Francis Lawrence is responsible for directing 3 Hunger Games films. You've got Hunger Games Catching Fire, you've got Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1, and you've got Mockingjay Part 2. And I'll say that those 4 Hunger Games movies are pretty outstanding. I mean, they are. I know he didn't direct the first one, but certainly the ones that he did direct are all part of that huge franchise and that awesome collection of films. He did the prequel Hunger Games film as well, which is called The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Did I get that right? I guess that brings us up to date to this one, which is The Long Walk. And he's able to take the blockbuster idea, that whole big budget idea, and he's able to make decent films out of it. He's able to ride that Hollywood studio system and deliver some great films. If we look at this guy's filmography, it's definitely a filmography that I wouldn't be against watching every one of his films, even Red Sparrow. Let's just wind it all back a little bit and talk about Stephen King and his relationship to this film and his relationship to film in general. At the start of the review, that was the first thing I mentioned, was the Stephen King thing. And it's an important aspect because Stephen King is one of this generation and last generation's greatest horror writers. But not only horror, like I mentioned before. So what movies is there from the Stephen King collection, right? Bear in mind, Stephen King is not a movie director. He's not a movie writer. He's none of that. He's a novelist, and his books are very, very popular across the entire globe. Over time, his books have been adapted into movies. Some of the notable ones, the ones that we'll all recognize the names of. For example, in no particular order, Shawshank Redemption. You've got Carrie, Children of the Corn, Stand By Me, Misery, The Running Man, which does have a relationship to this movie, The Long Walk. The Green Mile, which is devastatingly sad and upsetting and fantastic all at the same time. I suppose you can say It Chapter 1 and 2, although they're the same story, of course. Most recently, The Monkey. But out of all of the Stephen King adaptations, my favourite movie in that collection is The Shining. The Shining is one of my favourite films of all time. My top 10 favourite films does vary every now and then. I kind of put one at the top and move it for somewhere else and all of that, but it remains the same group of movies. And The Shining is in there. The Shining is part of that collection of films that I love more than any others. Stephen King famously hates a lot of the movie versions of the books that he writes. I don't know why, whether he feels like he needs control over it, or whether he feels that it's not the same as the book, or there's something just missing compared to the book that he wrote. I don't know what it is. I'm not sure. I know that he does not like the movie version of The Shining, which is completely opposite to the way I feel about it. Stanley Kubrick is probably one of the greatest directors who ever lived. And The Shining is a total masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. To know that Stephen King came up with the idea in the first place, that it was born from him, that means that whatever he feels about the movie version of it, I respect him for coming up with something as incredible as The Shining. Just totally incredible. For giving me one of my favorite films of all time. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. So I suppose talking about Stephen King brings us to our natural conclusion. So let's sum up The Long Walk. The dystopian element of this film really has come to the forefront in my mind whilst talking about it. And the fact that, the way things are going right now, and the people who are in charge of nations are a little bit fucking weird. Loads of weird shit going on politically, and loads of weird shit going on amongst the population, amongst the people. This film is able to tap into that. It's able to speak that language. It's able to give us a sort of idea about how the world might turn out if we don't get a grip of ourselves, if we don't stop what should be stopped. And the reason why I say that is because the story for this was written many, many, many years ago. And it goes to show that these ideas have been around for decades and decades, if not centuries, I suppose. They've all been told to us over and over again. Don't let fascism into your lives. Stop fascism now. Because if you don't, the fascists are just going to want to entertain themselves, and they're going to use you for their entertainment. And it's always going to be horrible, and it's always going to be brutal, and it's always going to be disgusting, and it's always going to be shocking, and it's always going to end the lives of good people, no matter who they are, no matter what side they're on. And the messages in The Long Walk are pretty much written right there. For all the facts that this movie is pretty obvious and pretty on the nose, but it's easy to get what it's trying to say. And I suppose that works in its favor. It works in its favor because anybody that sits down and watches it and thinks, well, I don't really understand, it's kind of hammered into you. So The Long Walk is a decent film. It's all right. I wasn't sure what to make of it when it finished, but now I've been talking about it, now I've been reliving it in my mind to do this review, I'm kind of all right with it. I'm kind of into it. It's got a real strong message, a message that we need to hear right now. And it's gruesome, and it's scary, and it's a little bit upsetting in some parts. If you're a fan of Stephen King stories, if you're a fan of Francis Lawrence, if you're a fan of general dystopian fiction, then this is the film for you. It's called The Long Walk, and it's available everywhere. Like and subscribe. I'll just give you a moment to like and subscribe. Press the thing and then just go up and press like. Or if you're on a keyboard, just press the mouse, like, just to go, yeah, it's fine. You might even want to subscribe. Subscribe if you want to. Thank you for watching. This is the Film Podcast. I'll see you again soon.